All right, so hello everybody, and welcome to MAYDAYCON 2020. I am your moderator, David Walters, and just wanted to kind of say a quick thank you for tuning in. So I'm the creator of the book review blog, fanfightaddict.com, as well as the host of Authors on a Podcast Talking Books, and, well, the creator of this virtual convention. But just a quick note that since this is live, feel free to submit any questions, and I will try to pick out some time, or pick out some as time allows. But really, honestly, enough about me, because I'm 99% sure you came to see all of these people here. But let's begin with some introductions from our panel, and we can get kind of right down to the nitty gritty. So, Gareth, if you want to take it away.
Hello, I'm Gareth Hanrahan. I'm a writer and game designer. The writing part is The Gutter Prayer and the Shadow Saint, which are lurking on a shelf behind me. And the game design is an awful lot of role-playing games, which are maybe relevant later on. We'll see if it's not my systems. But anyway, that's me. Hello.
It's backwards.
RJ, go!
Yeah, I'm RJ Barker. I'm the author of the Wounded Kingdom books, which are here, Age of Assassins, Blood of Assassins, and King of Assassins, and my new novel, The Bone Ships, which is here. My books are under the duck, which we've all been laughing at. I'm in West Yorkshire in the United Kingdom, and Leeds, which everyone will agree is the best city in England.
Sheffield is the best city in England, RJ.
Rubbish.
I'm going to try going upstairs. I'll be back in a second.
Yeah.
Okay. It was my birthday this week, and I got some lovely wireless earbuds, so I don't have to mess my hair up with big headphones. So that I thought ahead with planning my birthday gifts. Matthew.
I'm Matthew Ward. I'm author of Legacy of Ash, previously of contributing to Warhammer 40,000 Universes for Games Workshop. That's my introduction, because I didn't think this through at all. So, Anna.
Hi, I'm Anna Smith-Spark. I'm the author of the Empire of Dust series, the Court of Broken Knives, Tower of Living, Dying, House of Sacrifice. I am just outside London. I tweet as Queen of Grimdark, so I probably should actually be on the next panel, but I wanted to talk about something else for a change. An interesting fact about me, I may be known to the Queen of England.
Hey. And Angus was here. I think we lost him for a bit. So Angus will be joining us here shortly. I think he's getting a better internet connection. So once he pops in, we'll really get the show started. But how's everybody doing this morning? I mean, it's pretty early for me here in the States, but I know you guys are all like early afternoon?
It's lunchtime, and so I've already been to Sainsbury's today, which was one of my experiences I've had since the last time I went to Sainsbury's 2 weeks ago. That was absolutely horrendous. They talk about magic systems, people blundering around thinking, yeah, I've got a picture of a rainbow in my front window. I mean, clearly that just wards off all evil. I mean, you put a picture of a rainbow in your front window and you go out and clap on a Thursday night at 8 o'clock for the NHS. Volcanic eruption, sudden appearance of a dinosaur, asteroid impact, you're covered. You're completely safe at Bishop Stortford as long as you've got a picture of a rainbow in your window.
I'm staying in because I'm not allowed out. I'm vulnerable.
Isn't that
no reasons for anybody? I'm legally allowed out. I'm not like on tag or anything.
This just sounds worse.
Yeah, no, it really does.
but I've got an immunosuppressant, so I've got to be really careful. Basically, it's just like life keeps dealing me cards that I love. First of all, I wasn't allowed to eat health food and vegetables, and now I just have to stay in all the time. It's brilliant. Fantastic. I mean, maybe not working out as well for other people, but look on the bright side.
I say you could, put up some Christmas decorations. There's a lot of people in the States that are doing that for whatever reason. It's supposed to bring joy. So like I was driving back in. I took my wife to the lake so she didn't have to sit and listen to me talk for 14 hours. And I was driving back, and all these people had Christmas lights up. I'm like, well, first it's May. I mean, if that makes people happy, okay.
I think if you did that in the UK, there would be a lot of tutting.
We're already having trouble working with what day it is up until March lasted 10 years. I mean, I think discovered Christmas.
Maybe hate the children, it's a really cruel trick. To get the children really excited. And actually, no, 6 months at least.
Yeah, we're trapped with the children, remember?
This is mock Christmas.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I guess while we wait on Angus to get situated in his other room with a better internet connection, we can go ahead and start at least kind of on our main topic. So main topic for this panel, actually, Angus, just pop back up. There we go.
He's moved.
Hey.
Sorry. Hopefully that'll be a bit better.
Yeah, it should have worked fine. So, so like I said, so first, real main topic. Who in here believes that magic systems are important to make great fantasy, and why? Why did I know that reaction was going to happen?
I mean, they're not inherently important. Like, one can have great fantasy without a magic system. But in many cases, having some situation to your magic can be beneficial.
I can barely hear you. Is anyone else finding Gareth sounds like he's underwater?
Cutting it out, just me, Gareth.
Plot twist, he is underwater.
I'll try it again. If that doesn't work, I shall dig out headphones.
I have literally no idea what you just said, Gareth, basically.
Okay, I will dig out headphones.
See, I knew there were technical difficulties. I knew that was going to be a thing. So
I think what Gareth just began by saying, which I completely agree with, although he may not have said this, but what I think he said was that a great fantasy can have an amazing magic system. And an amazing magic system can be what makes a fantasy novel great, but it's not a necessary correlate. So I think I totally agree with that. Some absolutely amazing fantasy novels have very developed, beautifully developed magic systems, and the way the magic works, and the kind of beautiful theoretical, conceptual perfection of that magic system. It's beautiful and a really wonderful part of the book, in the same way that, a really beautiful equation is part of beautiful explanation of that. It's part of a really good science book. At the same time, an absolutely amazing fantasy novel can have absolutely no worked out magic system at all. I have no idea how magic works in my own world. I have never thought about it at all. I don't explain it. I have no idea how it works. And that it depends on the book and the world, and what the author's doing and what the author's trying to do, and what you're getting from the book, I guess. Is I think what Gareth was beginning to say. Let me make something totally different.
No, that sounds all excellent. Is that more audible?
Oh,
that's way better.
Yay! Technology. Yes,
See you anymore, but that sounds
what
great.
Hannah said, basically. That's what I would have said had I been audible.
I think it's a
I
really
always
weird
find
thing,
that-
actually, because when I think about systems, I think about scientific processes. So the whole idea of a magic system to me is really, really weird, because if you can empirically reproduce it, then it's not magic anymore. It's science, and I just find that a hard thing to engage with.
Yeah, I think that's what I mean. I think that's what I mean. It depends what you're trying to do. So some magic systems, the point is to almost kind of deconstruct the nature of magic, that it's not magic.
Mm.
The science underpinning this, you are almost creating an alternative scientific reality.
Yes, yeah, precisely that, actually.
Well, that's absolutely beautiful. That attempt to impose some kind of scientific rationale, and if it works, and if you've got that spark, that means it actually makes sense, and you can say, yeah, that I get that. You're giving an entire new ontology of the way your world works, which is absolutely fascinating. An entire different conceptual universe with different rules of physics, basically, which is absolutely brilliant. But then on the other hand, yeah, if you're just kind of like, and for some obscure reason, eating metals means you have magic powers. Well, that kind of feels, yeah, you're kind of trying to get some kind of attempt to rationalize something by attempting to rationalize it. It's rather like those people who try and have all those lengthy arguments about, rather like the kind of Da Vinci Code stuff about what's in the Bible. As soon as you try and kind of say, actually, look, Jesus was a man and this is the secret code, you're actually taking all the the mystery and the meaning.
Wonder out of it almost. Yeah.
You take the wonder out of it. Yeah. So it depends how it's done.
Yeah, I suppose the equivalent in science fiction is that weird thing where you've got this terrible tradition, particularly in the original series of Star Trek, where they go to a planet and then you have a godlike alien who can do whatever it likes, which is the other way around because you're then using magic to explain your science, almost, aren't you? It's
So actually, I was the cover article in the 14 Times talking about this, about how actually Eric von Daniken, all his stuff about the gods are actually aliens, alien beings with high technology. Actually, he is being more scientifically rational, I was arguing, than Richard Dawkins, because Richard Dawkins constantly falls back on all this stuff about chance and this kind of amazing sense of, this incredible chance that the world is just where it was in the solar system, and the solar system is just where it needs to be in the galaxy. And water does this weird stuff, and the temperature in this planet is just right, and these little life forms evolved, and then they became people, and then they became Richard Dawkins. Two people met and fell in love, and one sperm and one egg produced Dawkins. And he's talking about, he in fact is absolutely just kind of fetishizing chance, and he in fact deifies chance. Was von Daniken is just saying, there are these dudes in spacesuits who came down from space, and it all works according to physics and biology and biochemistry. And I love that. I'm so proud of having done that, actually. I mean, I'm so proud of that article.
when I'm reading stuff that's got magic in it, I always and it gets explained at some point, that I always end up feeling kind of, is that, because it kind of steals what is this big mystery. And then the minute your big mystery is solved, it's kind of, it's not as sense of wonderish, which is what I like. I like that kind of, this is quite chaotic. I also don't like rules in general or being told what to do, even when I'm doing it myself. So, and I'm incredibly lazy as well. So if I set up a magic system with hard rules, then I have to reference back to that first book all the time, which is a right pain when you're trying to write a book. So everything in my books is quite free-flowing and chaotic because it's much easier, basically.
So and also RJ, no rules and lazy magic.
yes, basically. I mean, in the Wounded Kingdom, there's one rule, which is that magic sucks the life out of the earth, because you need to, for magic to work dramatically, you can't have it as a get out of jail free card. You can't just use it whenever. There has to be some sort of break on it, otherwise.
Yeah, I think that's actually why people often create magic systems, because of course what you're doing, it's the problem I had. By the time I've got to book 3, I've got Total War situation with a couple of mage lords and dragons and this all-powerful world conqueror figure. And you have, if you don't have rules and some kind of it drains the power out of the earth, or your metals run out, or whatever, you've got this, I've just invented the atom bomb. The next battle will just be, and then they just nuke everything and they win. And that's why a lot of people have magic systems, I think, because you've got to have that. Basically, you've got to find some conceptual sense beyond. And then it mysteriously turns out the archmage had bumped his toe and was in bed with gout, Angus, at the morning. And the dragon was on strike. You've got to have something that works a bit more convincingly. I mean, you can't just go, kabal, we've just annihilated everybody and win, because otherwise your magic has to have a fail. You end up with a kind of Superman scenario if your magic doesn't have
Marvel
something.
movie.
Yeah. Angus, what are your thoughts? You're pretty quiet.
I don't think that a magic system is ever going to be the best thing in a book. I don't think it'll ever make a book. I think of the elements that make up the book, character and plot are always going to be more important than a magic system. But it can add a great deal. I don't for a second think that it's particularly important to have a defined magic system or any magic system at all in great fantasy. I think if you think of the most popular fantasies, things like Game of Thrones, I mean, there's quite a lot of magic in Game of Thrones, but it's not what anybody thinks of when they think of Game of Thrones. They think of the characters and the world more.
It's almost like intrusive magic.
Absolutely, and I think do our editors all tell us that magic has to have a cost? Is that how it goes? Magic has to be based on something has to die every time you use magic or something like that, because that's been drummed into me certainly. I like that idea. because
you can't just have like this consistent magical source.
Yeah, but I also think as a lazy author, magic is quite useful because, oh God, they're stuck in a jail underground, the volcano's erupting, there's lava coming towards them, how are they going to get out of it? Oh, well, magic will do it.
Magic or a secret door, right?
Exactly, yeah. And they had to kill a rat or something to death made magic or whatever it might be.
The flip side of it, though, is that if you have a society that has had magic and it plays a big part in their society and the way it works, you kind of would have, if not, you would have systems and you would have beliefs that are built all around it, even if they're kind of not real, just things which I might put in a book later on. Now I've just thought of that. I'm sure someone's already done it, but I quite like that idea because there's a logic to it. I think that's what matters, is the logic of your world, not whether you have a system or not.
Well, one question as well is, do you want to have that explicitly spelled out to the characters, or like you kind of like as one book where like your main character is a magician and he knows how magic works, and there's like a sort of explicit here like the laws of magic, here is how things here if one says these words then this effect will happen, and it's a sort of quasi science. But you also have a book where the main character, the people character, knows very little magic, and you've got these fairy lords off doing stuff, and they might say oh, I cannot cross this running water, or I cannot cast spells on someone with their coat being turned inside out. Is that a system, or is that just the other sticking rules on because it's dramatically convenient? Is it still a system if the reader never knows how the system works but just sees the effects of it?
Yeah, I think it's deeper than that. Because that's how my world works. That these kind of weird. I use a lot of mythology. I'm writing a kind of mythology I'm writing very kind of. No, I'm not systemizing. I'm not world building. I'm writing a mythological world in which things don't necessarily make sense. And yeah, that kind of weirdness of. Well, that kind of, something, iron has certain powers, or you have this charm that has certain powers, or you have these beings that exist and have certain powers, but there's no explanation for it. And that's what I really love about mythology. I love the kind of weirdness of Celtic mythology, I've read a lot of British folklore and folklore tradition, and that kind of weirdness about, you can't really, a lot of it's inexplicable. I mean, people try and build stuff about, well, iron has strange magic powers because that dates back from the Bronze Age. And people try and impose these rules on it. The sword in the stone and the sword going back to the lake at the end of King Arthur. That's clearly related to Bronze Age and Iron Age sacrifice for swords in lakes. Well, maybe it does, but on the other hand, you don't rationalise it. That weirdness of it. It's a totally numinous world. It's a world in which things have a huge amount of power. Things have a kind of magical, godlike marvel to them. And the fact you don't understand why, you can almost grasp the rules, you can almost grasp the kind of meaning. There's water, there's iron, stone, almost grasp it, but you can't. And that for me is absolutely the heart of what a really, really good book with a magical world within it. Mary Stuart does it absolutely amazingly in her Merlin trilogy. You almost grasp the rules of the magic, but you can't. And that as someone who studied anthropology, that makes sense in how actual real magical societies work, and in fact how our own society works.
But I feel I need to know the magic myself in order to give that impression to the reader. So the reader can come away thinking, oh, I have no idea how that magic works. But in order to write the book, you have to understand the magic system yourself, so you know what you can do without seeming ridiculous or losing, suspense or disbelief.
I did in my first trilogy, but in the Bone Ships, I've no idea how the magic works. But that's okay because the people in it who I'm writing about have no idea how the magic works because humans don't do magic. Magic is done by another species. Hang on. Sorry, this is going to be a text message to get to hear a bit of Slayer. So that kind of works, and it's to do with that logic. But what Anna was saying about these little Gaius, I'm never sure how to say that word. Gaius. These little rules and things that work with magic. That I think they're lovely because they're very our world. Like I was on Twitter talking about magpies. When you see one magpie, I say morning general, or I say how are you, so I don't get bad luck. Now, I don't believe in bad luck at all, but I do that, and I don't walk on 3 grates in a street. And there are all these little rules that we all live our life by that are not a system as such, but they are kind of the everyday magic of our life. And I think that really works when you put it into a book, these little sort of hints of things going on in the background and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that kind of richness is what really makes the world. And I say I don't understand how any of that works in my world, but I think so my world is so much built up on my own subconscious. I think I don't understand it. It absolutely imbues the way I see the world. It's the way I see the world, I guess, just written down.
It's almost that you don't see the magic itself, but you do see its reflection in everything else that's going on in the world. And I think that's hugely important because everything that RJ was just saying is that even in our decidedly, probably, touch wood, non-magical world, we still have these bits and pieces that bleed through into how we will behave and interact with things. And when you get into a situation where people can, blow things up with magic or heal people or raise the dead or whatever, that will then trickle through into everything that goes on. And that's the more of the system I'm interested in, I guess, if we want to bring it back to that, is about how that then shapes the society beyond it. And you can see that, and it becomes that mirror you hold up to the magic that no one understands.
So
there we are, silence everyone, fantastic.
Everybody just be silent whenever Matthew answers that.
Yeah.
All right, so as far as putting magic systems into a fantasy novel, I mean, I know you all do it completely differently. Some are intrusive, some actually have fairly complex systems. Do you feel that it needs to be complex to be interesting? And what I mean by that is, most magic systems today aren't just fireballs and magic missiles. Some require different elements. Others require drugs or hallucinations. Some need specific jewelry, and others have major costs associated with their uses. So do you think it needs to be complex? Do you feel like intrusive is enough? Or really does it just depend on how you want to introduce it to the world?
I don't really do complex, so I don't want it to be complex. I don't want to have to think really hard and work out exactly how the magic's working. Having said that, I mean, for example, Brian McClellan's Powder Mage novels have quite complicated magic with the use of gunpowder, and I do love those. But generally, I think you want to keep the magic a bit in the background, and not, unless you're a sort of nerdy, sort of super Star Trek fan who likes to know the very nitty gritty of the thing, in which case you're going to enjoy a very complex magic system. But I'm not like that.
Yeah, but it depends also on the style of book you want to write. Like there was a fantastic pair of books. The author is escaping me right now. There's one called Master of the Five Magics, which basically this world has 5 different magic systems, and this guy becomes the archmage mastering all 5 of them. There's alchemy, sorcery, conjuring, and so forth. But the other book then, Secret of the Sixth Magic, is about meta magic, and basically this evil guy shows up who can unlock the laws of magic and change them. So instead of alchemy working off the principle of sympathy, where if you have a doll of someone and stick pins that they go sort of like voodoo-esque thing, he changes so it's to the principle of contagion or something, where you have to have some item of theirs, and they get changed again as the principle of similarity, where you've got a statue of someone, and basically each magic is defined by this one rule, and this guy can change the rules, and that really plays the whole idea of magic systems as here is the rule, here's the cost to cast a spell. What if we change it? Which is taking the whole magic system to the extreme.
I've always thought it'd be tremendous fun to write something where the magic system is the more drunk you get, the more powerful you become. but also, obviously, the more terrifying you become as well, because you're not in control of that thing.
There's a game. There's a role-playing game called Unknown Armies, where that's one of the magic systems. Dipsomancy.
Now, do different alcohol types give you more or less depending on their?
No, it's based on famous drinks. So if you drink the cask of Amontillado or steal Elvis's last drink, that gives you extra magic power, and you can
But
I'm totally off topic. I'm now reminded of the book I started reading over someone's shoulder on the tube, which contained the immortal line, "They are like normal vampires, but they're beer vampires."
One benefit of having a sort of complicated magic system is that it lets you sort of extrapolate stuff. Like, if you do a magic system based on constellations, say, and you have like a dozen constellations in your world, and your main character can draw power from the constellation of the sword, and that's just basically your gimmick for having this guy having a magic sword. Then you can sort of later on go, okay, I've got 11 other constellations. What are they? Given my system specifically says there other people must have powers from the other constellations, you can sort of follow your own rules, which could be a useful way of inspiring yourself, or also write yourself into horrible corners because you've established that magic only works when it's not cloudy.
Is that thing we take a step back and go, but this thing that needs to happen now can't happen because of the thing that I put in the magic system earlier on, and
previous novel.
It's that simplicity is really, really. I think if your plot revolves around the intricacies of how various magic orders or whatever mesh together, then I think. Yes, I think having that kind of structure is great, but I think most of the time where it's just part of the world, particularly if you've got other things going on in the world, it's simplicity always for me, I'm afraid.
I mean, it comes back to, it really depends what kind of book you're writing, what you're trying to do. So, I mean, I am one of those totally nerdy people who loves I love all the kind of world building, the explanation. In some ways, I love reading fantasy novels as essentially, I've studied lots of ancient history. Hey, here's a whole other new culture. I can study their history, and that's one of the major things I love about fantasy. So, someone like when Steve Scott Baker, when he has all his appendices and his explanations and the kind of summary stuff at the back, I love all that. So I love the detail he's gone into. When people do dictionaries and when people do really complicated stuff about the magic, I love that. In the sense of, this is a really gripping story, but this is just another anthropology textbook I can really get into. It's just, the world doesn't exist. And that means it can be even more amazing and more spectacular. I mean, I love the way Baker does his different schools of magic, and there's all his factual stuff about how it works. I love that stuff, but that isn't what I want to do. I mean, if I had 10 years, I would love to do something like that, but I just don't have the time and the patience. Did it all, but and then you get someone like Mike Fletcher, who is an author again, who I hugely admire, and his Manifest Illusions world, where he basically has this kind of, if you have a psychosis, it becomes real. So he's talking about, he's basically talking about someone like Trump. He's talking about someone who's, by the fact that they are like, yeah, I'm this amazing, I'm a Superman. Somehow that delusion somehow means that it becomes real. And the way his magic system is entirely based around the strength of one's delusions. And it's a beautiful way of pointing out, in fact, the insanity of one's own world. His books are, by doing this, it's an incredibly political way of talking about, but talking about how fucked up most of us are, how troubled most of us are, how messed up the world is. And it's just beautiful. But again, that's not what I am interested in doing in my books. It's whatever works to give that book a spark. It's whatever just kind of gives that book something in a different way. Yeah.
And by the way, everybody can feel free to express their opinions. We're not. This isn't for 18 and younger audience. So, hey, so actually, Misty sent me a question, asked which author have I read that had a very creative magic system. I have to agree with Angus. McClellan's Powder Mage series, the ability to snort gunpowder and direct bullets. I mean, that kind of blew my mind when I first read it. Granted, I am still kind of a noob, I guess you can say, when it comes to fantasy. I mean, I've only been reading it for the past few years, and a majority of it has just been like orbit centered. So all of you guys. So
they're a very good publisher, I've heard.
Yeah, they're pretty decent, I guess. So, so kind of next question. So, if magic isn't the end all be all when it comes to make a great fantasy novel, I mean, what would you say is the main thing that you need in a book? Would it be the characters? Is it world building? Is it giant chaotic battles, good versus evil, just wanting to engage the reader, or none, or all of the above?
It's people. You have to have people, and you have to have people that the reader can care about. because if you don't have that, nothing else matters. You may as well be looking at a pretty picture, because that's what when I'm reading a book, it's because of that person. Whether I like them or not is immaterial, but I need to have locked into them, be interested in them, and everything else just sort of. Magic for me is a way of affecting the character, so the reader thinks, "Oh gosh, this is happening," rather than a way of the character affecting the world. If that makes sense, probably doesn't. I often don't. That's how I think of it, and I don't see in genres. I don't think about fantasy or science fiction or crime. I think that's just dresses for stories. I think you write about people and then use all these little ingredients that are around to make those stories interesting in different ways. And magic is quite fun. And I often use magic as a metaphor for money. Magic
power.
is power, and in a lot of fantasy you have these sort of old money who've been magical for ages and stuff like that. And in the Wounded Kingdom books, magic is oil. It's quite sort of upfront. It's an ecological allegory, and magic destroys the world, and that creates a position. But that's all immaterial, because it is all about this boy growing up and his relationship with his mother, because that's what's interesting in it, and that's what holds people in. For me.
I agree that characters are most important, and I've been listening to lots of non-fiction recently. I've been listening to John Ronson's books, which I strongly recommend. And I'm listening to them because I like him as a narrator. He's got a very distinctive style, and he's very self-deprecating in a genuine way. So even though his books are non-fiction and they change from subject to subject, I keep reading them because I care about him. But I do think that you can have a book that works on plot over character. I mean, it's a crap book, but it can be readable and it can work if it's got suspense and you care about what happens. I mean, I've just read one, which I won't name, which was brilliant to read because it made me feel brilliant about my own writing. But you can, some of the sort of, I would say more popular thrillers, but I don't think they tend to do that well. Sort of the unpopular thrillers, if you read some, they're readable.
There you go. Let's do one thing out this panel. Choose an unpopular book as your model for how to write it.
He just has this ever-growing stack of books next to his desk. He's like, all right, don't write that.
Yeah, just read bad books and you'll be a great writer in your own mind.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I mean,
character, then plot, then world. Those are the importance. And then magic is part of world.
So for me, it's about... Okay, this is where I come across as a total literary snob, which I am. For me, it's about prose, basically. It's about language. It's about a book which, and I don't necessarily mean literary prose, but a book which is written well and has the way its language is working, the way its prose is working. It will create a character. It will create the world. It will create vision.
Literary voice is
yes, yeah, that kind of, yeah. If a book is written well, then the characters have a life. If the book is written well, then the world has a life. If the book is written well, then the book works. You can believe a lot, and you can forgive a lot if the language, if the book is written in such a way that you buy into, you enter into it. I mean, it's actually rather what Angus was saying about hearing John Ronson's voice. If that voice is coherent and appealing to you, and you feel that that voice is talking to you, then you will forgive an awful lot about what's going on in the book. You will believe in the characters, you will believe in the world, you will believe in the mechanics of the plot in a way that if the book's somehow just singing to you, you just won't. That's what, when people talk about character, what they mean is this really well written character. It's written in a way that you
intrusive narrative is, I love it. I want that in a book. I want to feel from the first line the author's voice coming through. And fantasy is quite, sometimes it does that, and sometimes it does a very sort of step back where things are happening. I don't know how to describe it, but it's like there's no barrier between you and the plot. Does that make sense? Where with an intrusive thing,
there's different books, different styles of different books. So I'm a huge fan of Brandon Sanderson, actually, because what he's doing is just so, he is the most amazing page turner. It is not. People are very rude about his prose. I think prejudice justifiably, but my God, those books are page turners because there's something in the way they're written that just you cannot stop reading. It just has that. It has a voice. It has a very, very distinctive voice that somehow works, and everything works within that.
What are your thoughts, Matthew?
I think I'm with RJ, really. I think it's about people. I don't. When it comes down to it, you have to care about what's happening to the people in the book, and I think everything else is then in service of getting that message across in a clear and an exciting fashion. And that's for me sometimes where I feel that magic systems do then tend to take over, because if you're not careful, it becomes about how your magic works and not about how the people are actually interacting with it and what it's changing about their lives and the decisions it's forcing them to make. So yeah, people all the time.
I'll happily be heretical and say that if a book's ideas are strong enough, then that can overcome deficiencies in character. Like, one of my favorite books is House of Leaves, which is this fantastic and really, really strange horror novel by Mark C. Danielewski. I mean, that book, the characters in it, there is a guy who makes films and his wife and their kids. And the narrator in the footnotes has a bit more of a character, but even he is fairly thin. But the prose, the typography, and the ideas in it are so compelling that you can't really care about the characters that much, because they're almost there to to wander around this house and look at things. But the house itself is so interesting, and the way the book tells the story and builds atmosphere is more than compensates for the characters. I mean, if you just purely want character, why are you doing fantasy? Given,
very lucrative.
Oh, yeah. I'm gonna have some sitting here, millionaires.
History takes a lot of research, Gareth.
Oh, I know it does. That's why I'm doing fantasy. I know how much research it takes. But I mean, even if character is your sort of dominant interest, then you can use the magic system and the stages of the world to throw new light on that. You can put your real characters into impossible situations, which is I suppose the main benefit of having a magic in your fantasy.
There is stuff that works with that. I've just read Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy, which is astounding, and the characterization that is these are awful human beings, and that's it. And it is purely the language in it that carries you through it. It's an astounding book, but I think I still wanted there to be a person that I could like in it. I couldn't. They're just horrendous.
Yeah, I mean, as a reader in a community of a lot of other readers, I come across a majority of people saying that characters are the main things that drive them to read and finish a novel. If they can engage with a character or characters within 50 to 75 pages, then they give up and go to the next one. Now, there are some that will just plow through a book even if they can't get engaged, and I don't know why people do that, because there's always so much life to live and so many books to read. But I feel like world building, and magic systems and plot points and so forth are kind of like the icing on the cake when it comes to reading not just fantasy but science fiction and thrillers and so forth. Is that if you can't get engaged and feel for who you're reading about, then nothing else really can save it. Now, I'm kind of the same way. I mean, if I can get in, kind of not really entranced, but if I can find a character that I'm like, okay, I want to see this person succeed, or I really want to see this person die, then I'm pretty much I'm in it for the long haul. Well, I didn't realize it was going to be dead silent when I was done. So when using magic in a novel, would you rather use it subtly? Would you rather focus on something else and it just be intrusive? Or, I mean, again, does it really just kind of depend on the novel that you're wanting to to write or the story you're wanting to bring out? Would you rather it be, kind of like low fantasy where it's just intrusive and it's not really talked about, but as it progresses into maybe a series that it's kind of expanded upon and people are like, oh my gosh, there's still magic around somewhere.
I kind of like having early feed stuff in there, so it's not clear what's going on, or it's certainly not referenced as being magical. But then as the further you get through the story, the more you see that maybe some of those things you took as being quite mundane earlier on have actually got a bit of a magical core to them. Because I think it's one of those things that's quite nice, particularly when you're building a new setting, is you can ease the reader into it instead of going, look, here's magic. While you're learning everything else, learn about this too. But as the reader gets more comfortable, you can start going, well, that thing you saw over there, that flash of light was more than a flash of light. That's a really awful example, but you know what I mean.
There are elements in my books where I think a lot of the stuff around Marith, I think I was trying what exactly is going on with him and how far he has some kind of magical power. I always wanted to leave ambiguous. I wanted it to be. So one of the books I absolutely love is Mary Renault's Alexander trilogy, and she is essentially writing a historical novel, but of course she's writing it in a world that's actually saturated with a kind of magical, there's a lot of science and rationalism, but there's also a deep magical core. She's writing about a person who appears to have believed on some deep psychological level that he was the son of a god, but also to believe deeply on some different psychological level that he had this great conflict with his human father. He's so, he's caught between these two totally different senses of who his father is, both of which he appears to have believed. And he appears to have believed increasingly throughout his life that he was a god, he was himself a god. And how she writes about that. And she's not doing what a lot of historical novelists do, which is you have your protagonist who is the one rational, one Western European scientific atheist mindset in a world where everyone else is really religious and weird and believes all this miracle crap. She's writing in a numinous world in which many of the people believe very, very strongly in the gods, and in fact in the idea that Alexander is perhaps not simply a human being. And I wanted to write that ambiguity around some of the characters, around Marith, what on earth is going on with some of this. So there's a scene in book 2 where I write a sea battle, and whether there are actually sea monsters involved or not is entirely ambiguous, because that was quite influenced by Moby Dick, where actually there's a really lot of supernatural stuff in Moby Dick, but at the same time it's a very rational scientific account of whaling. It's just what exactly is going on in a lot of places in Moby Dick has never been entirely clear. But I also just wanted to go to town basically linguistically and aesthetically with massive magical explosions and massive magical battles and dragons and gods and huge descriptions of just sublime magical wonder, because that's kind of what I live for. That's those moments where the world is just made so much huger and more intensely romantic and incredible and amazing than my own mundane reality. And it's just kind of stitched together in the way that, the Iliad is like that. The Iliad has stuff which is very much about men in a war setting, and obviously composed by people and told in an environment where people are very familiar with war, where this is a very kind of realist, inverted commas, doing it again, Audrey, where this is a very kind of down-to-earth account of life in a military camp. But at the same time, then you have gods involved. You have these kind of moments of that incredible moment where Achilles fights a river. And that just the absolute moment of sublime wonder that the world is made so vast and incredible. And then you go back to a much more human level. Not quite what's going on is slightly unclear. And that for me is that was really what I was looking for. And that for me were really.
I don't necessarily think you have to have magic for fantasy. I don't think the two are. You immediately think of the two as being linked, but I don't think they are. Especially in the Bone ships, that like Anna's saying, that's a world of myth. It's not real. There is magic that the Galen, these bird creatures, can control the wind, which is something that's useful for a world where it's all ships. But the world is not really about that. It's about their mythology, and they have these goddesses, and it's very hard. And it's about the creatures and this land, and how everything about this land has sculpted these people into being. I mean, they're a monstrous society, what the things they do. But the fantasy in the book is the magic is probably the least interesting element. And I'm never going to explain how these creatures can control the wind.
Of course not.
It's not important to the plot. You don't need to know that. They can, and that's part of the way their world works. Right. And maybe they can talk to these massive dragons that are coming back out of history. And it's this kind of resurgence. This is a world that's treated as if it's real, and it has a lot of sort of seafaring myths that I've stolen from Moby Dick and stuff like that. But the fantasy element, I would say, is much less about magic than it is about just the sheer, I don't know if it's strangeness, just otherness.
Yeah, it's the it's romanticism. It's creating a romantic world. It's creating a world it's creating this kind of incredibly romanticized world. That for me is absolutely the core of fantasy. That's what makes something fantasy. Absurd romanticization of the world, that a rock is not a rock, it's the bones of a dragon. An old man is not an old man, he's an incredibly powerful sorcerer. It's that romanticism, that kind of that layering of different possibilities.
Look on.
Okay, I was going to say.
Are we putting our hands on it?
If we start raising hands.
Yeah, sorry. Can you see my hand? There we go. Yeah, I think the idea with putting all the magic in. I mean, I think it's nice to drip the magic in bit by bit and start off with a strange hedgehog and end up with a tsunami of saber-toothed tigers or something like that. To increase it and to give that promise to the reader. In other words, just another sort of suspense device. But I was thinking about explaining the magic. My first 6 books are all historical fantasy fiction, and I think when you're writing it into the real world, I think there's a greater need to explain the magic, to explain how it could have happened in our real world. Because there is magic in our world, in that flocks of birds and schools of fish all move together in such a way, in their hundreds of thousands, that can't possibly be based on anything apart from some weird...
it's fluid dynamics. It's based on fluid dynamics. It's fluid dynamics. It's fluid dynamics. It's
magic.
They work in the same way that individual molecules of water do.
Well, that's a lovely theory, but it's not proven by any way, is it?
I've got friends who can model it in computer modelling.
I'm sure it is, but
what you're doing. I mean, having a quantum physics that explains stuff like that. I love reading stuff about really deep physics because it's that completely insane modelling of explanation of how the world works.
Yes, and it's a lovely theory, but actually it's magic. They haven't got it quite right. And so, I mean, if you love to romanticize the world, you don't want to explain absolutely everything, and that's one of the things that's driving a romantic. So we do have magic in the world. It's we also have psycholinks down through generations of animals, for example. That's how a baby deer knows left in the woods alone will survive because it knows what to eat. Whereas leave a baby human in the woods on its own, and well, you go to prison because it'll die. So I think there are 3 ones: A, drip magic, and B, there is magic in the world, and C, that I think the more close to our own world that your world that you're writing about is, the more you have to explain your magic in an acceptable manner.
I always think that writing is the nearest to actual magic you can get, because you sit there with a blank screen and you...
Yes, Mr. Moore. Got the hair for it anyway, just to get the beard.
But it is, and I've always thought that it's just this music is the other one that I think is even more impressive. That you can create waves in the air that will affect you emotionally. It's just when I sit and think about that, it sends me a bit dotty, and I've got a head start as it is. But so there is these things that we can't explain on a really emotional level, that we can explain on quite a boring technical level, and magic exists somewhere in between.
Yeah, I mean, I think that kind of notion of writing as magic. RJ and I will have to talk about this at some point, apparently, because we always end up talking about this. But that notion of writing as magic, and I mean, if you look at a lot of if you look at, say, Norse mythology and runes and words of power, you know, in a lot of cultures, the notion of words of power, languages of power, rune symbols, that's at the basis of what magic is. So if you look at kind of in the Earthsea books, the notion of language and words is huge. That's what underpins their magic. R. Scott Baker has people singing, has these chants, in different magical chants. A lot of magic systems are essentially underpinned by language, and I think that for me makes
the name of a thing.
Yeah.
Yes, naming
that thing is
actually Earthsea is a great example of a book which has a magic system, but manages to largely retain the sort of the numinous and strangeness of the world, which is a very sort of fine thread or fine line to dance on. She does very well.
Yeah, no, she has that lovely bit in Tahanu, which is essentially, coming back to romanticism, Tahanu is essentially a domestic novel about a woman bringing up a child, but it's completely high fantasy because it has this incredibly romantic. Nothing happens in Tahanu, basically. So it's Irish pastoral, basically. It's just it's no different to Edna O'Brien. It just has and actually Edna O'Brien has some incredible magic stuff in it underneath. Anyway, but no, so there's this lovely line where Tenor asks one of the old wise women in the village, how does she know that Ged is a mage? And you get this, she goes about, deep calls to deep. And eventually Tenor just says, very frankly, essentially to the reader, no one knows. She has no idea. They're just coming up with this, they're just mumbling the same old kind of, well, it's magic, I believe, because it's impossible stuff that we know very much from our own world, is that kind of way of just completely obscuring the fact that I've got a clue. Just does. And I love that, the way she just says that, but in such a way that it makes absolute sense. It doesn't destroy the illusion.
Matthew, what are your thoughts?
I
like putting people on the spot.
Yeah, it's all right, because I'm not sure I have anything to add to what I said earlier, really. I think, magic is an excellent vehicle for applying and adding doubt into your world. And if you want your characters to doubt the setting that they're in, there's no finer way of doing that. Because as Anna said, there is a romanticization that comes with that. It makes the world feel bigger and grander than it is. And that's just a fantastic way of getting all that into there. But again, your characters have to perceive it the way you want the reader to perceive it, because otherwise we get a strange break in it. Because the reader goes, well, I understand how all this works. It's not a murmuration of birds. It's molecular behavior or whatever. But your characters in the world think it's one or the other. Then that's when you get the dissonance in. And I think that's where you lose that immersion that you should always be trying to get to, particularly when it's something that doesn't exist in our world. It has to be as credible to your characters and therefore to the reader as the fact that things fall when you drop them. It's that basic almost.
Yeah, no, it's that almost going back to kind of it is that romanticism, that almost kind of that child sense of the world. The child sense of the world is utterly magical, is utterly kind of numinous. All those wonderful stories that everyone can tell about the child who completely certain that Father Christmas didn't exist. Obviously it was Mummy and Daddy, but the Easter Bunny absolutely exists. You know, that kind of weird, some things you can rationalise, some things they just don't. And actually, to bang on about R. Scott Baker again and again, but the way he has two different conceptual systems. So he has high magic, he has his mages, he has his schools of magery, and they sing, and by singing they can fly through the air and blow things up, and it's high magic. But then, because what he's writing, you also have technology. The people living in his world don't know it's not magic. So you have, and there's part of the fun is trying to work out what stuff is. The Heron Spear, there's huge amounts of debate in Baker fan groups about what the Heron Spear is. And the general conclusion, spoiler alert, is it's a laser, super laser. And you have what's clearly an atomic bomb going on. And you have descriptions of radiation poisoning. But of course, that to the people within the world, that's magic. They've got this other magic that to the reader is magic. And it's that absolute balancing of magic, high magic that is magic, and this other stuff that we think is magic, but you as a reader know isn't magic, is magic, and are trying to work out what exactly the technology is that's doing it. And that's just absolutely beautiful, the way he just balances that so perfectly.
See, there's interesting dichotomy there. I haven't read the book, so I'm sort of speculating. You've got technology, which is saying, like, isn't magic, but it's seen them to magic because they don't understand how it works. And you've got high magic, which is magic. But I guess the question is like, if there's a system to the high magic, isn't that just a technology that they don't understand? And like, is magic just the thing you don't understand?
Yeah, so so actually, I completely did Bradley Pierpolu in about this a couple of years ago when we were on a panel, and we actually talking about maps, and I said to him at the end of the panel, so if you drew a map of your world, is it a flat mythical map of a place that doesn't exist, and the moon is a moon goddess, and the sun is a top rock, or the eye of a god, or a massive dragon, or the daughter of the sun, or whatever. And if you sail to the end of the world and you've talked about, we'll go to the end of the world and there's that great big wall of ice and beyond that the giants live, would that all actually happen? Or is this a ball in space that was formed from a great pile of cosmic dust coming together? And the moon's actually the moon and the sun's actually a sun. And if these guys went on and developed technology, they could eventually get rocket technology. You could end up writing science fiction set in the same world. And he was just, because he never thought about that. And as soon as he started thinking about that question of, is your world a real world?
Yeah.
So, is your world a real world? And is it just a ball of rock in space with a sun and a moon, and one day they could get technology, or is it magical? Is it
that weird mental stumbling block for us, though, isn't it? Because to us, magic is magic. But if you lived in like the 12th century, then going to see your saint's relics to cure yourself of leprosy, if that's magic, but not then. That is just a thing that happens.
It is magic.
It's absolutely real, and it's really weird trying to get your head over that into that place where you are them, and it's just the world.
So for them, is the world? So yeah, if you look at medieval cosmology, and Jerusalem is the center of the world, and the world is this kind of flat thing. Is that real? Is that real, or is the world actually a ball of rock? And once you start thinking about that in your own world, you start feeling. It actually bothers me. It keeps me awake. That's a real place. When they talk about the stars, what are the stars?
This is why I advise everybody never think. Just don't do it.
Is it a Pratchett thing about people acting as if the world is round or flat and it's fine until they fall off the edge of it because they think it's one way and it's not the other? It's put far more artfully in the original, but it's people's beliefs actually. It's how much impact they have on perception of the world, isn't it? And magic can be a huge part of that because it fills in the gaps between the thing you can see and the thing you're fairly certain or you hope will happen, and the bit in the middle is the magic that gets you to that place, even when it doesn't.
Actually, a lot of magic is also nostalgia. It's that if you think about what a lot of mythology is, a lot of mythology is essentially people of the world now, which is a fallen world. It's in sort of Greek mythology that we live now in the world, which is even past the world. We live in a world of clay. And mythology is talking about the age of heroes, talking about the age of iron, the age of bronze, the age of silver, the age of gold, golden age being the age of the gods. Most mythology has this sense that we live in a fallen world and the past was better then. And a lot of what magic is that way of talking about a nostalgic world where, the classic fantasy, the ruins of a city, and the city was built with magic or with technology that we do not now have. And these buildings that were built and we cannot understand how they were built. The blocks of stone were too big to be raised. That sense of a world in which there was a better world, there was a more glorious world, there was a world where men were as gods. And now that's gone. And we can only look back with awe. That's a huge part of what magic is. It's looking at the world as once was better, once we were as gods.
I do wonder sometimes whether magic is the invention of that confident bloke you've all met at some point. Somebody's going, how was this thing built? And he went, oh mate, yeah, dragons. Yeah. Yeah. My friend Dave, he saw the dragons and there was a bloke with a pointy hat and he just told him what to do. Because that's the essence of all our things we build up these myths for things we don't know to explain them, and then we get explanations.
Other than that, magic is the longing that we all have for the world to be greater than it is. Magic is the longing that the world was greater than it is, or the world could be greater than it was, and our lives could be greater than this.
I don't believe him when he says it.
It's one of those things I quite like actually just out in the real world. It's why I like old places ranging back from sort of Neolithic hill forts to castles to the London Underground. And I know why all of those things are there, and I know the rational process by which they came about. but I like to stand there and think about what the other things could be around it. And there is a connection there to things that I have no proper connection to at all, the different bits of the country and all the rest of it. I don't know the details of the history. I just know that the history is there. But being able to go, no, this is the place where this battle was fought, or this is the place where this terrible mystical thing happened. That's really powerful, and I think it's one of the things I try to bring through into my writing is just that idea that for some people, that thing that I'm looking at, this big collection of Oxford tiles and the half moon arch over the top of Mornington Crescent Station or whatever, everything that I'm thinking in my head that could be, there's a place where that is real, and that's part of what magic is. It's about making something special out of the mundane, even when you know it's not true, and then translating that back into a world where it can be. That's the best kind of wish fulfillment, because it can't be magical in the real world. I can't make it magical there, but I can write it down, and then maybe someone will believe that it is in this other place. That's wonderful.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's like it. Actually.
We all think as writers, we all sort of live on an edge between something more numinous, or maybe we indulge it. Because there's a feeling you get, like Matt was saying, when you stand in a cathedral, and it's the same feeling I get when I stand in a wood or a forest. There is this feeling of contact with something slightly other.
Well, you almost are going like, what if, or only, or if only, or could this, or to write, you need to ask questions of the world around you and see what could be twisted and made different.
I always feel like I'm reaching for that feeling. That
See, that's where it comes back to prose, because that's what I mean about prose. In a book, prose is a good prose is giving you that, is conveying that experience. What quality of a book that really brings it alive for me is the language can impart a part of that astonishing feeling. So, I mean, the sections of the wasteland set in the stuff about sort of London Bridge, where Eliot is conveying that numinous feeling, the psychogeography of just through a couple of lines on a page, and it's that for me is what makes magic in the book, or makes a magical system or a magical conceptual world within the book. It's the use of language to just somehow cross that reality to give you in printed words on a page, or words that are being read out on an audiobook, that feeling somehow, in some incredibly weird way that is magic, essentially.
Angus, you've been quiet. Thoughts?
I think it's painkillers, man.
I was just watching Angus thinking, you are wasted.
I'm really out of it. But no, I mean, I'm enjoying the chat very much, and I'm agreeing with pretty much. I mean, basically, these panels, you agree with what everybody says, then you plug your book. That's how they work. Wonderful things.
So cynical.
I mean, I was going to pop in with some cryptozoology. I love the concept of magic showing us more, and there being more. So I think we do have magic in our world. I'd like to stress that point a bit more. I'm a big fan of cryptozoology. I once spent 5 days looking for Bigfoot with the Bigfoot Research Organization in Olympic National Park on the top left-hand corner of the USA. And there are others, as the megalodon shark near the Philippines.
Stop. What did you find? Stop the panel.
I mean, Bigfoot doesn't exist. Obviously, it's not one, it's a species, because how could just one exist? That would be nuts. Bigfoot is a 9 to 12 foot tall ape, Gigantopithecus, it's known as. It's meant to have died out 30,000 years ago in China, but it didn't. It crossed the land bridge and now exists all through the Americas, in the wooded areas, particularly in places like Olympic National Park, where genuinely it's impossible to walk into those woods. The scrub is impenetrable. And the idea that a large animal could exist there is really quite believable when you go there. I mean, no bones have ever been found. People quote this as a reason for Bigfoot not existing. But if you give the Bigfoot, if you suspend your human arrogance for a second to give the animal the intelligence to hide its own bones, then maybe it could hide its own bones. And I was with people. I was with a doctor from the University of Los Angeles there, who was there with sound recording equipment. And we sat there, in the deep woods. And several people on the trip said they saw a Bigfoot. And there's one point when I clinked a beer bottle. It was about my 6th, so it's maybe a story maybe. against a stone there, and we heard the same noise repeated just down the hill, and there was nothing down the hill apart from the impenetrable scrub. And then one of the guys was going, "Try that again." They were all very, cool Americans, all Americans.
Macho.
Yeah, no, I'm a massive Americanophile, whatever the right word is. And so I tapped it 3 times, and the Bigfoot responded with 3 taps. And yeah, all these guys had stories of having seen a Bigfoot. And then on the last night, I was sleeping in a tent with a lady who went for a pee in the morning and came back and said she had seen a Bigfoot while going to the loo. And she was an academic at the University of Seattle. And why would she lie?
I think I remember briefly talking about this on our podcast chat, but yeah, I'm glad you're going a little more in depth.
Just to clarify,
and no, I haven't seen any in Alabama.
Just to clarify, you clinked a beer bottle on the ground, and you heard the same noise down the hill.
Yeah.
Are we to assume that Bigfoot had his own beer bottle then?
Yeah. There were footsteps around us. And he had something that could replicate the sound, maybe one of his huge fingernails, because they are renowned. They kill you if you annoy them. It's another reason no one's ever found one, because they get annoyed by that.
Because they don't exist anymore. That's why.
Yeah, they stomp you into a greasy spot.
Exactly.
And
then you can't find those bones either.
The very snuggly Wendigo tried to lure you downhill to eat you. That's what he was. Come here. I've got beer.
Yeah.
Or if you're American, you got Jack Link's jerky, because that's the thing that they put the Sasquatch in the Jack Link's commercials. So if you've got jerky, then you're more than likely going to have a Bigfoot in your area.
The Squatch meat.
Yeah, exactly.
But I love that idea. And there was an ox found in Vietnam, I think in 1992. And I say found, basically white people knew about it. But there was an ox unknown to Western science called the Vu Quang ox until 1992 in the jungles of Vietnam and Cambodia. So it's possible for a large animal to hide out. And there's Makolo and Bembe, of course, in the Congo, which is another...
This comes back to this kind of notion that I really believe all this stuff. I don't, but I do at the same time. I really, really believe all this stuff. I believe all of this stuff.
You mind about the birds as well.
I absolutely do not believe in ghosts, but I have seen one, and I can't explain it. I don't. But I've seen something completely inexplicable. I can't. I don't believe it. I do not for a second believe in ghosts, but I did see something, and it's so weird.
He said hi. He said, "Hey, I don't believe in you, but you can come hang out for a bit."
I saw a figure in the back of a garden when I was visiting a friend, and it walked straight through a fence up into a field. And it completely freaked me out at the time. And then about 2 weeks later, we found out somebody had died in that field.
Okay, so was this during the daytime or at night?
No, it was at night.
Okay.
It was at night. It was during the winter. It was snowing, which is why I could see the figure, because all the light was reflected up from the ground. And they were wearing a blue anorak. And I just remember seeing, going up, there's a boy in your back garden. And he just walked out through a fence. But I don't believe in ghosts. Absolutely not. But I absolutely did. It's really weird. We're strange creatures.
I once woke up being held down by ghosts. In a big country
mansion. All right, we're going to have a completely separate podcast. Because I have many questions.
Apparently, but I don't want to know it. Yeah.
I know that explanation because I have it quite often. And
that's there's a
old
particular
tag.
There's a particular word for my. I had a boyfriend who had it a lot, and he'd wake up screaming, and there'd be all kinds of. It's really
paralysis.
Yes,
I know there's an explanation, but I don't want to know the explanation.
Yes.
I had to research it and train myself out of it when I was really ill, because I would get trapped in a sort of cycle of dreams where something monstrous was coming for me, and I would wake up and put on the lights, but the lights wouldn't work. And then I realized this thing was coming for me. And then I realized it was a dream, and I would wake up and put on the lights, but the lights wouldn't work. And it would just go round and round. Absolutely terrifying.
To come back to the topic of the panel, that kind of, say, writing a character who has that kind of experience, but in the world of the book, it's not clear whether that's whether there's the rational explanation of sleep paralysis, or whether that's the result of magic or a curse or whatever. That kind of, if you imagine writing a character who say having that experience in the ruins of our city that was created by magic by our place or whatever, that kind of drawing on your own experiences of stuff like that. That is, it's pretty clear that sleep paralysis is a rational explanation for a lot of stuff.
Or it's a Bigfoot.
Having that kind of, a lot of people kind of argue sleep paralysis is an explanation for vampirism. That terrifying picture, the nightmare that's often used in pictures of gothic horror, the woman with the thing on her chest, the demon on her chest, the goblin thing on her chest. It's often used as what sleep paralysis explains vampirism, or sleep paralysis explains this kind of weird stuff. There's weird stuff in southern Italy about men at night who go out and have night battles.
Oh, the Benedante, isn't it?
Yes.
The werewolves go to hell fighting with fennel sticks.
Yes, all this kind of weird stuff, and a lot of this is often the night hag, the nightmare. A lot of this is supposedly rationally explained by sleep paralysis, and having that sense of this is perhaps a personal experience you've had, or you've read someone else's personal account of it, and working that into your narrative as it being slightly unclear what exactly is going on. Things like that are really, really fascinating and can really give a kind of richness to the way you're talking about weirdness and magic and monsters and things which are kind of supernatural experiences. It's a really, okay, plug the 49 times again, reading that kind of weird stuff. It's a really, really good way of enriching your world a bit and getting a sense of what it might be like.
I don't know if you can see my bookcase there, but the whole, you can't, but it's just full of 14 times this. But
Have you got the copy with my story, with my article in then somewhere? There's another article.
No, because I found after like 5 years that it was recycling the same things. I stopped for a bit. I'll find it though. But do you think there is a kind of two sides of coming at fantasy, where there's like a hard magic and creating a world in quite a sort of scientific-y type way, and then there's the other side which is more myth and folklore?
Well, people always say like fantasy and science fiction as sort of like the two branches of speculative fiction. So I think there's a sort of a science fictional approach to fantasy where one tries to systematize it and basically like create this plausible alternate world, and then you can sort of there's the old mythological approach where basically you're like taking old stories and updating them, or just trying to build something that feels like an old story. Yeah, I mean, are they entirely different genres, or are they just sort of like two approaches trying to get to the whole experience of the numinous, where like can you build an alternate world so coherent and plausible and believable that you can then insert something impossible into it, and it feels like you're like seeing that impossible thing in the real world. Can you build enchantment?
All right, so guys, we're coming up at about an hour 15. So kind of the last thing I want to do is, since you guys are all not able to do like in-person events and so forth, thanks to the lovely coronavirus, I want everybody to have an opportunity to kind of plug a book, whether it's upcoming, just released, previously released, maybe it's your last release. So everybody can kind of have a minute or so to kind of plug your book, kind of tell everybody what it's about if they haven't read it. So Gareth, we'll start with you.
Oh, okay. I feel like I'm doing telemarketing now or something. No, I mean, the book is The Gutter Prayer and Shadow Saint. If you're really, really into magic systems, then yes, there's plenty of systematization in there. I also do role-playing games, where magic systems are an entirely different kettle of fish. And actually, there actually is a system and involves dice rolling. The other thing, actually, I was going to bring up, and I'll plug now. Tim Clear, who does a fantastic writing podcast, did this Twitter thread apparently 2 years ago, which I'll link in the comments something, where he did basically like one like equals one interesting magic system, and that's a fantastic thread to read because he just keeps churning out ideas. And if you're ever stuck for a magic system or a weird bit of sorcery for your books, there's fantastic ideas in there. And yeah, I'm Mythilder on Twitter and everywhere, and garhanrahan.com. And I don't know, I don't have a Patreon or a SoundCloud, so I'm out of things to plug.
RJ?
I'm RJ Barker. This is my my latest book, The Bone Ships, which it says brilliant by Robin Hobb. That's the best bit so far. I can stop now. And it's kind of mythic and big ships and strange, lots of strange creatures and dragons the size of cities. One dragon the size of a city. I like it. And I
would hope so.
On Twitter. But you better search in RJ Barker on Twitter, and I talk a lot of nonsense there as well as here and everywhere. But yeah, buy this, you'll like it probably.
And I also recommend the Winded Kingdom series by RJ. It was his first trilogy by Orbit, so if you haven't read it, read it. They're over there somewhere.
They're more traditionally fantasy, I think, where this is more shippy fantasy, but not in the
more
way
shippy and bony, right?
Yeah, shippy and bony, and
that just sounds very odd.
Yeah.
All right, Angus.
I've had 2 trilogies.
And I've got a copy of yours over here if you want to talk about it.
Oh yeah, I can that's my book.
Yeah. That one.
Trilogies, Age of Iron, which is Iron Age Britain, and saying what really happened when Caesar invaded, because of course there was magic around in those days. It's not really fantasy because it's true, including the tsunami. You Die When You Die is the first book in my West of West trilogy, which is Vikings in America, because they really were there. And they really did get further than people think. But there probably weren't, giant monsters and saber-toothed tigers and all that sort of thing that I've put in the West of West trilogy. It's epic, it's tragic, it's funny. It's a group of Vikings crossing America pursued by badass warrior women who are out to get them in this strange and dangerous world. And I'm writing more stuff now, but that'll come. I'm on Twitter. You should probably follow RJ rather than me, because he's much more interesting and funny on Twitter than I am. And yeah, I don't tweet much. Watch this space. I've got some more stuff to announce soon, but not quite yet.
That's it. Matthew?
Legacy of Ash, which you can see. I'm not going to reach back and try and get it like everyone else has done, because I'll be fall off my chair, and that would be horrible. Which is magical tale of kingdoms at war, lots of politics, lots of scheming, but it's a world that's generally forgotten its magic and forgotten its gods. And guess who starts to show up when everything goes horribly, horribly wrong? Lots of big epic fantasy, lots of characters to fall in love with, hopefully, anyway. Daring do battles. It's good fun stuff. Second one, Legacy of Steel, is out in November. The electronic proofs are on my desk, or sort of hidden in my computer on my desk at the moment. So yeah, did I say September? I meant November. What did I say? Anyway, later this year. November. But yeah, it's great fun to write. Hopefully, it's great fun to read. David seems to like it, so we're probably okay. So, Anna.
Hi, I'm Anna Smith's book. It's a mine, The Broken Knives. Hey. Oh, that's the second one. And the House of Sacrifice. They were described as fierce, gripping fantasy, exquisitely written by Adrian Tchaikovsky, and a masterwork of dark fantasy by Nightmare's Conjurings. Which, I mean, that's like my life over, basically. I mean, like that's the pinnacle. Be described as a masterwork of dark fantasy. They're mythical, intensely lyrical, not an easy read. Mine saying he's enjoying them the second time round. Now he's actually not trying to read them and skim read them. I actually understand what's going on now. You cannot skim read them, and they are, kind of lyrical, poetical. Described as nihilistic, but they're romantic nihilistic. They're absolutely romantic. Writing my absolutely romantic conception of the world, while I was also understanding that the world is profoundly nihilistic, because, hey, look around us, guys. There ain't no justice and life ain't fair. Dragons.
We're really boosting the.
No, they are intensely. They are about love. They are about beauty. They are about the world as a numinous wonder. astonishing place that you find someone you love, and when you see something you love, just hang on to it and hang on to it, because as we are seeing at the moment, the world really isn't fair. I am intensely proud of them. The third one, I am has sacrifice. I kind of feel if I never write another word, that would have been enough. I have written some other words. I have a short story coming out in a anthology called Lost Gods at some point this year. I think it's been slightly a victim of the unpleasant, but the short story in that I'm intensely proud of. It's essentially a story about being a silky, or being it's a kind of, in a really glib way, it's a Me Too story. It's my attempting to write about being a silky, and also, of course, at the moment, being a woman experiencing life at the moment, because if you're a woman with children at the moment, life is very strange and very difficult. And yeah, so that will be coming out at some point this year.
Fantastic. So, what's that?
I was just going to say, I suppose I tweeted Cream of Grimdark, although I'm barely tweeting or going on Facebook at all at the moment because I can't face the world. I cannot.
I understand.
The first time I've spoken to people outside my own household for probably about 2 weeks now, because I cannot face the world at the moment.
Well, everybody that tuned in and everybody here, just thank y'all so much for taking the time out of your day to tune in and to chat about fantasy. It's been an awesome experience. I've read all of the works by each author here, and I can highly recommend every single one of them. They're all phenomenal. They're all out from Orbit, which also helps. You just have to go to one website. But just thank you guys for being here. I hope y'all have had a good time. I hope everybody that's tuned in has enjoyed this chat. Coming up in just about 10 minutes, we'll have a live reading from Jonathan Wood, aka John Collins. He's going to be reading from his book Fool's Gold, which is the Dragon Lords #1. Also another Orbit author, which should just be OrbitCon. But just thank you all again, and maybe we'll see if we can do this again at some point. We'll see.
David, thank you so much for organising this.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Bye.
Bye.